There was a click, and then a light so blinding that Sarah lost her balance. She was in a squalid bathroom with a broken toilet bowl in the corner behind a rotting wooden partition. A long trough ran the length of the far wall at floor level. Everything was filthy. But next to Sarah, a rusting tap spat brown water into a low, long basin. She grabbed the edge of the sink and thrust her mouth under the tap, opening it up to full. The liquid tasted warm and rusty, but it was wet and it didn't stop. Sarah gulped and swallowed, ignoring the sense of smothering when it went up to her nose. After a minute, she stopped and stretched out her back, letting the water drip down her chin, feeling the life seeping back into her body. That was an excerpt from a World War II thriller coming out in March called Orphan Monster Spy, about a young Jewish girl in Germany in the 1930s who goes undercover in a boarding school to spy on the daughters of Nazi officers. Her mission is to steal the plans for a bomb from the father of one of her schoolmates. The book has been called gripping, deeply disturbing, and chillingly good. It's also been called unforgettable, and likely to put Matt Killeen, its British author, on track to becoming a new favorite for readers around the world. But Matt's own journey to writing this story has been quite the adventure.
I've been working on this book for, an absurdly long time. Most first books take a long time, and most first books don't get published, so I'm very fortunate. But it's been about 5 years from start to finish. I had just started as a writer for a toy company. I'm sure you'll ask me about that later.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a story in my mind. I just completed a very short, a novella for children, which was based on a film script that I once wrote. And it was fairly bad, but I'd kind of finished it, and I kind of knew that wasn't the one, but it was great practice, and I wanted to sort of push on and try something else. And I had this idea. And I got myself on a master's program for creative writing for children, and that was the making of me in many ways, because it got me reading again, and got me thinking about the sort of the craft behind the writing. Because I'd been writing as a advertising copywriter and largely ignored journalist for about 8 years, and it got me more thinking about the craft of writing, and particularly writing for children is you have to be concise. There's no fat on a children's book. You can't get away with waffling. You have to get them you have to get people to the point, and you have to, in a very short number of words, you have to get across the emotions and the information without overloading them. There's a great deal of craft to it.
It's a very dark topic that you write about in the book. I mean, you've said it in World War II, you're dealing with Nazis, from what I understand, and all of that. And how then do you translate that for a young audience, that kind of darkness?
There are a number of things when you're writing YA. Yes, so when you're talking about young adult books as a kind of it's a marketing grouping more than anything else. It's a way books are sold. It's not really a genre by itself. And so, you are speaking to some adults. You are also speaking to some older teenagers who one hopes the school system has sort of delivered a general idea of what this topic is. But if you're looking at the younger people, I think it's important. The age of the protagonist is very important when you're dealing with children's books, because that kind of sets the tone for who can possibly interact with them. And I think if you are a 13-year-old, you're reading about a 15-year-old, and you are seeing those events through the filter of a 15-year-old, that makes them more real, and more accessible. And I think you have to make a story, light it up in some way, and you have to make it that little bit exciting if people are going to be able to sort of take on the inner truth of it.
Right.
I think the protagonist is very important, the person that the reader can identify with. And if that person is written with enough authenticity that people can see themselves in it, then you can actually put that character through a great deal of darkness and hard times, and you can see the world through their filter.
Where then did you get the idea for the story? Why was this what you wanted to do?
I grew up in the UK in the 1970s, and the war was very big business at that point. It was all the comics, all the books, all the films and TV series, all the stuff that we would hope was going to come on that Saturday night. And it was very tied up in the national identity. But for me, I grew up in those conditions, and my mother's best friend was German. And so we spent many summers with their family and many summers in Germany with these wonderful, caring, compassionate people who were also rabidly pacifist. You know, I couldn't even pretend that something was a gun or a sword. I couldn't play anything that had any kind of violent edge to it. And it was very hard to square those people who I knew with the kind of the way that Germans were portrayed in comics and stories and books, which is very sort of morally superficial. So I kind of had that experience in my life. And as I got older and learned more about the Holocaust, that dichotomy just grew more perplexing and strange. And I could not get my head around it. And I think that kind of gave me a sort of horrified fascination about the Second World War that has never gone away. Just as I was thinking story ideas, I was used to go past in Stockwell in South London. I used to pass that about every week, and there's a mural painted on this traffic island, and it's part war memorial, part sort of celebration of famous people from the local area. And there's a memorial to Violet Zuber, she was an agent for the Special Operations Executive who was dropped into occupied France twice to help with sabotage and sort of undermining the German occupation. And that in itself was often on the very edges of morality. But I was looking, and I was calculating dates, and I worked out that she was 21 when she volunteered. And I was thinking the kind of mess my head was in at 21. And would I have been capable of that? No. And actually, I wasn't much more mature at 21 than I had been at 18 or 17 or 16 or 15. And as I was having this thought process, Sarah was born. The idea of how young could you be and be a useful asset in the war? And then how would somebody that young become an asset?
Totally relevant as well in the current climate then around the world, for sure.
Well, it's only got more timely, which is very unfortunate. Somebody on Twitter the other night said, "Oh, this is just says so much about modern America," and I was like, "Yeah, unfortunately,
exactly."
It's I was talking my concerns about sort of the growth of the Third Reich and the rise in fascism. I was thinking how easily we were slipping in that direction. But some people might have laughed at me if I'd said, well, we are, there are Nazis there. They just don't feel they're allowed to speak.
Right.
And meanwhile, we have governments, behaving like the Third Reich,
Yes.
Because, our country is in danger, therefore we're going to start to limit civil liberties because, like, you don't have anything to fear if you're not up to anything. And of course, this is how police states are created. And
exactly.
It has only got more horrific since then, to be honest.
Do you feel then that writing a book such as this, which is also a very complex and adult topic, had to come to you at a time in your life where you're no longer the 20-year-old, you're no longer the 30-year-old, that you've also kind of grown and been through so much yourself?
My brother, who is also an author, says that writing novels isn't a young person's game. When you're 16, you can write a hit single that will last forever, that will be recognized by everybody all over the world. You are probably unlikely to be able to write a novel that has any weight or meaning at that age. I mean, subsequent thinking that there are authors I have come across who are writing some incredible stuff at absurdly young ages, which would probably say that adage would be a lie. But I think it is definitely easier with life experience to be able to construct stories that are multi-layered. I think personally for me, this book is the apotheosis of all the other creative endeavors that I've done. I don't think I've wasted my life on any of those, but I think that all of it kind of came together in this book.
Brilliant. And that's
Hopefully.
exactly. Yeah, no, I wanted to go back and look at that because you were saying all of these things that you have done. Could you talk us through some of them and how you kept going? Meaning, how did you not ever give up and go, oh, this is ridiculous. I don't know what I want to do.
My experience when I was like 9 and 10, in the city where I grew up, there were schools that you could go to if you passed an exam and you did well enough, you could go there. And it was kind of sold to me that was my big chance in life. And if I could pass these exams, I could, get to this school, and then the rest of my life would unfold in a way that would be advantageous. And like most things like that in life, that's not actually how it worked. Like most people who are a little bit different, I was very socially awkward, and that school was very difficult. It had a very fixed idea about what constituted success. It was you go, you get through, you pass your exams, you go to Oxford and Cambridge, and you get, added to that large number of people who go to Oxford and Cambridge. And I struggled very hard with that, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And I hit around, I'm trying to think, 13, 14, and I kind of discovered music. hadn't really listened to any popular music up to that point, and then I think I heard Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Right.
And I was like, this is incredible. This is an amazing thing. I have to have this. I have to listen to this all the time. And when you do that, then you run into some other musicians, and then you have a band, and you have a group of people, and you all want the same things. And that was a kind of big moment for me of like figuring out my life. And I was an artist, but I struggled with it. I didn't really know what it was that I was trying to do. I left school at 18, and instead of going to university, I had a band at that point that was very slick, and I turned into a professional. Now, back then, being a professional musician, certainly in the UK, involved being unemployed, but it meant that you spent all your days writing music and rehearsing, and then you would play one gig and make some money, and then you would use that money to travel down to London so that you could play in front of one person and a dog. Hoping that guy from the record company was going to show up for 5 minutes to watch you. But kind of by the end of that, like 2 years that I'd been doing that, and we got very close to being signed, and then it didn't come off. It was just very exhausting, to be that focused on that dream, and it not to happen. So that band split up, and I'd had a place to do art and film at this university, and I kind of beginning to fall in love with that because I'd been taking. You could, by that point, to give you an idea of the era, you could rent a video camera from the TV rent shop, and so I started filming other bands, and then I started like editing that together, and that kind of love of the visuals and putting that together, it was felt like a seamless transition. I had something of a panic, a kind of existential panic, because most of the people I knew who had gone on and tried to be filmmakers were living in squats and didn't have enough to eat. And I think that kind of was unsettling. The other thing that happened is, I met a girl and we got married, and she was a bit older, and so we had a child, and there is very few, I can't remember who said this, but it's like the enemy of creativity is the pram in the hall. Right. When you need to provide rent and food, it is very hard to go, right, well, actually, I'm going off to London this weekend and I'm going to be sleeping on someone's floor while we shoot a 3-minute promo for a band that no one's ever going to hear. And that's the kind of thing you need to be doing, really.
Right.
And so I started working for this laser tag center, you run around with laser guns.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I did some event work for them, and they were like a very always on the verge of going out of business. But there I found computers, and I started doing design work, and then I started designing their flyers, and that's how I sort of got back, and I became I basically became a graphic designer. I stayed there an absurdly long amount of time running this laser tag center and running around with the laser gun and then doing design work and then running the nightclub at night. And I don't remember getting a lot of sleep during that period. And then I got divorced and I had an opportunity to actually kind of figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And then I was thinking, well, actually, what I would like to do is advertising. And then I was kind of conscious that I was a good designer. And if you wanted an unpopular relative photoshopped out of your family photos, I was your man, but I wasn't the best designer in the world. And I broke up with my partner at the time, who was the copywriter. She quit. And then I ran into this guy who was very talented, and he was it was one of those moments in your life when, because you kind of, if you are a creative person, there's an idea that, oh, well, I could do that, I can do that. And it was kind of the realization watching him designing that I was good, but I was never going to be great. I was not a great designer, because I did something and he looked at it and he moved one object like half an inch to the right and it just transformed the picture. And that was kind of like a Damascene moment where I went like, oh my God, And fortunately, he was Swedish. So I said, well, okay, you be the designer because you're clearly better. I'll do the writing. And that was, again, second moment on the road to Damascus, where all of a sudden I was writing and I was going, this is brilliant. This is great. This because it wasn't that it was easy, but just that it came easily to me,
right,
as a result of everything I'd done. Yeah, and then I thought, this is it. This is what I should be doing. And then I got very, very sick, very, very quickly over the course of about 6 months, from being perfectly well to being in hospital for like 8 weeks. And that kind of ended the professional team that I was in. I think coming back and trying to hustle, there was a big period of recovery, and trying to hustle at that point and taking my work around to people and trying to find, new people to work with. And I did more and more the work that I was getting the freelance writing gigs because I'd actually had a proper job, and I could write and I could string a sentence together and write a paragraph. And it is actually surprising how few people can actually do that. Everybody thinks they can write because they can put words on paper.
Right.
And it's never as easy as that. So I was getting quite a lot of freelance work and doing that kind of thing. But I kind of came to a realization, because if you take, you have what's called your book, which is your ads, your spec ads that you've created. And I was on my umpteenth iteration of this. And I was taking it around and showing to people. And I had long since learned that you can't take every single piece of advice off everybody, because people will say it's so subjective. People will be giving you conflicting advice. And I kind of got to the point where somebody looked at my book and he didn't like it. And I was like, you know what? I know these ads are good. And like, I no longer care what anybody thinks. So I kind of, at that moment, it was like a weight off my shoulders. And almost immediately I got like 3 job offers.
Oh, wow.
Like overnight. Because it was just something, it must have been something about the way I was acting. It's like I no longer cared.
Right,
and
right.
I saw an ad on this one temp agency's site, and it was like Lego looking for writers. And I went, oh, that's exciting. And how awesome would it be that to work for a company where I didn't have to, when I worked in advertising, I would go, right, well, this beer, why? Because advertising is not about lying. Advertising is about getting to whatever the central truth is and teasing that out and showing people. So I would have to go, well, it's not enough for me to say this beer is good. I want to know, how is it good? What makes it different? What's that special magic? And with Lego, I never had to do that because everything they make is pretty good.
It's Lego. You're like, yeah.
Getting that job, and I thought it was just going to be a copywriting job, like for the catalogs and stuff. And I sat down and they went, right, okay, so you're gonna write this comic. We're going to give you an hour. And I went, oh, is this the kind of thing I'm likely to be doing? And they said yes. And I went, oh, great. And it was kind of the maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I sort of took it with both hands.
Yeah.
That was great, and that was a fairly significant moment in my life, because it kind of gave me, it had covered all the insecurities about contributing and looking after my family and, you know, putting some food on the table. And at the same time, there was this huge creative element. And it also was like a kind of final acceptance that this morass of stuff in my brain was actually valuable. And I think that gave me, and it was around then I was thinking like, I would quite like to write, you know, or write again, you know, that's kind of how it all kicked off.
Did you feel that it was necessary to go back to school to get that MFA? Was that something that you felt was necessary? You know, considering you were already working in Lego, why didn't you just kind of go, right, well, I'm just going to pick up my laptop and get started on something?
Because I was doing that. I was writing on the laptop on the interminable train journey home and stuff. I need deadlines. You know, I need people going, I need this, I need to see this by next week. Otherwise, stuff just doesn't happen. And the fact was, I had that, and it was saying, right, we're going to be discussing this book at Tuesday at 8 p.m.
Okay.
So you better have read it, and you need to have written like 400 words of this writing exercise. You need to have that done. And that was invaluable. And then everything else, I think I hadn't even understood just how valuable that MA was going to be. You know, I'm glad that I kind of went with the instinct to, well, give me some deadlines, get me thinking about writing outside of Lego.
Well, it seems to me that's what you've done a lot of. I mean, hearing you retell the story of how you got to where you are right now, there's been a lot of adapting, and you've allowed yourself to explore, and you seem to have dealt with anything that might have defeated other people or disappointments that might have kept someone down really well, because you seem to just move around it or find a way to move on from there.
I think there's always a tension when you are a creative between the raw ideas and the raw kind of creation and the craft that is required to make that work. You know, there were moments where I went, actually, this is terrible because you've wanted to be a graphic designer all this time and you thought it would be wonderful, and now you're doing it and you're miserable. What's the matter with you? But I think when one is sad, it is normally because there is something amiss that needs fixing. And I kind of recognized that doing this was not enough creatively.
Right.
It wasn't answering whatever demon it is inside me that demands feeding. It was not feeding that demon. And I also to recognize that if you are in that state of mind, you aren't necessarily going to be doing the best job for people. And I started to feel bad because I was thinking, okay, so your business cards are perfect and everything lines up, but like that brochure you just created was, you know, pedestrian. So I think it is important to recognize those moments. Though when I was running the laser tag center, there was that time when I was already getting divorced and there was already the same pressure to deliver and to stay in that job was diminishing. And I was thinking, you need to leave. And I think when you do that, it is, you know, it's difficult to go, right, I'm leaving and I'm going to jump out the plane and pull the ripcord and see where I land. And that's scary. And I think that's an important thing you need to do. You need to know when to leave that plane.
But did you have to do it when you knew what the safety net might be, or did you trust enough to kind of just go, oh, well, you know, screw this. I need to get out. There's
been a mixture of that kind of thing. There are times when I would go, right, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something else. And I knew what that thing was. There was times when I left and I did not know what it was I was going to next. It's kind of a mixture of both. And the thing is, even then, like time passed and I was coming up now. The book was coming out and I had a sequel that I needed to deliver. And I realized that with, you know, I have as well as the 19-year-old child, I have the 2-year-old child. And then I realized it wasn't going to happen unless something gave. And so I had to let Lego go. As it happens, they were fine with it and did not cry at all. Because that was just the moment. I was able to recognize that was the moment to go. It was time. And, you know, I have a book coming out and I have a deal for that and I have a deal for a sequel, but it's still scary. People might buy this book. I might never get another deal again. And so you at some point you have to do the scary stuff.
Right.
And that's also the motivation. I've got a second book to deliver. If I don't deliver it, they're not going to pay me. So,
but there was an auction for your book as well, wasn't there, for the publishing rights?
yes. Well, I have a very good agent. I think that the book was very. I think it almost by luck. It was very timely. Nazis were in the news, and I have a very good agent. And then there were lots of people who were very enthusiastic about it. I mean, equally, there were lots of publishers who were like, "Nah, not going near this." But I say it is extremely gratifying if you have been working on something that long for people to go, I love this. I have to be part of it. I have to stake my professional, reputation on being associated with it.
Yeah.
And that is quite special. Having to choose who you want to be the guardian of your book moving forward and for the rest of your life is a very strange experience, because I think the book was entirely my own creation, and that was absolutely me on my own doing it. Most creative endeavors are in some way, there's a collaborative element. And at this point, this book had been created almost entirely by myself. I'd had some very good advice. I'd had some amazing support. I'd had a few good ideas from other people from the MA cohort and from the Society of Children's Writers and Book Illustrators, but
right.
Pretty much I'd done that by myself. And then you take this thing and then you hand it over to an editor who is then going to kind of make changes. And although that in itself, that is also very collaboratorial, right. It is very, very difficult, because when you have been working on something that long and sunk so much of yourself into it, it is tough.
Has the way you looked at your life changed then, now that you have hit this age and you've become the author that you in the beginning didn't think you were, What
is strange about it is that with being an author, you can sell your first book at 60 and you can be the biggest author in the world. Most musicians, if you're not, certainly back when I was a musician, if you weren't signed by 2021, that was it. You could forget it. And so there's been this constant, and part of this is that exam. Where's the exam I can take to do this? Where's the brick wall I have to bang my head against in order to do this? And so doing that, my whole life has been kind of like, clock is ticking, got to get this, got to do this, cannot spend any more time here, cannot, I'm wasting my life. And, or I am wasting the talent. And so I have been kind of racing the clock for like 25 years, 30 years, it seems. And I think that I'm at that point where I can go, okay, I'm at if I may not be at the summit of the mountain, because there's always something else. In the same way, arriving at that school at 11 and discovering there was a whole bunch of other stuff I had to do too. I have this book to sell, I have a sequel to write. Fun as they are, they're all extra challenges that require extra, work. And to become a best-selling author then is the new thing. I do feel at least that I'm on like the Hillary step on Everest. I'm on a flat bit, and I can look back and go, look what you did. So I do feel I'm at that point where I can kind of enjoy it a bit, enjoy the success. I mean, I think also being ill and disabled for a good 5 years, I think it was in all, I feel like I've got my life back, like I'm having like a second lease of life.
What would your words be now for our listeners, let's say, who are in that area where they're maybe feeling a little bit lost or haven't found what their thing is yet, and are at the point of maybe giving up and thinking, oh, well, maybe I should just find something that will, pay my bills, as opposed to following what their heart might be pushing them to do.
Bring into your working life some passion and joy. It is impossible to say, okay, this is my work and this is my life. This idea of work-life balance, and I'll balance the two, and it doesn't matter if I hate work. That doesn't work. You need to have a synergy between the two. And I think there is always a way, if finances are an issue, there is always a way to make enough and follow, in some way follow your dream. I would hesitate to say, right, leave your job immediately and go and let's follow this dream without any kind of structure to it. Like most things, there is hard work to be done and to lay down the groundwork, particularly if there's anything creative. But if you separate out your work life with your completely from your life and your passions and your creativity, you're killing a little bit of yourself. This stuff feeds your soul in such a positive way that it is the balance for the misery of not being able to do it. So I always say it's like following a football team. If you don't watch the rubbish 3-0 drubbing to a team you should have beaten on a wet Tuesday night, and then there's no trains home. If you haven't done that, then when you win a trophy, you don't get to enjoy it. Maybe you are working in Starbucks during the day and that's paying the bills, but that is enabling you to do something else. That feeds your soul, Having said all that, always ask yourself, is this really what you want to do? If you are pursuing a dream you had that began 3 years ago, and now you're kind of still fighting and it's making you miserable, and you are allowed to change your mind. You are totally entitled to go, you know what, that isn't what I want anymore. And you can totally say, I am not going to do this anymore, and I haven't failed. I haven't failed at doing this. I have learned all these things. I have all these skills. It has fed this bit of my soul, my creativity. And maybe I'm not going to be able to do this the rest of my life because actually getting there is making me a bit miserable. Maybe the industry is in a slump and there aren't that many jobs. You need to allow yourself to reconfigure, to look at the information and go, well, you know what? There's this bit that I like best. Maybe I can do this somewhere else. And that should be a constant process,
Yeah. Gosh, that's brilliant, Matt. Do you feel this is it for you then? Are you on the train that you want to be on for the foreseeable future?
No, I do. I'm only being cautious because with everything I have said, it sounds unlikely that this is it. But right now, books are what I want to write. And while people are going to buy them and enjoy them, then that's definitely what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, within this, there are things like I'm writing this story about this girl, and I'm going to write a sequel, and maybe there's a series in there if people want to read it. But
sure.
Do I want to write any more than 2 of this story? And those are the kind of questions that I have.
Yeah, and as you said, right, it's like everything you've been through, all the ups and downs and all the variety of different jobs has led you to this point and contributed to the kind of writer you are.
Yeah. And I think that's it's analogous with life generally, is, you have to be careful with regrets, because actually those are all the things that have made you the person you are. And, you pull on those threads with great care. Regrets that you have in your life, things that you might have done differently, these are all the experiences that have made you the person you are now. And if you like yourself even a little bit, you pull on those tapestry threads with great care.
Thank you very much. I, for one, can't wait to read the book.
Thank you.
And from what I've seen online as well, there's several hundred people who can't wait either. So I think you're on your way. I'm very, very pleased for you.
Very scary. Very scary.
It's fantastic, Matt. It is just fantastic. I can't wish you any more luck than I already do. You know what I mean? You deserve all of this, and I'm really, really glad it's coming to you now.
Cool. Thank you.
Matt's life has certainly not been dull. He's off on a book tour soon and working on a sequel. Who knows, we may even get to see Orphan Monster Spy on screen someday. Now, if there's anything I hope you take away from this conversation, it's to never give up, because your dream come true could be right around the corner. I'm Marga Ortigas. Thanks for joining us on About That.